So now we're going to start a chapter on Japan, chapter 15. The standard for this chapter is describe China's influence on culture, politics, and economics in Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asia. We're going to discuss the Ainu people in Japan, examine the introduction of emperors in Japan, and analyze the changes brought on by Prince Sotoku. Japan is an island chain which essentially is the tops of mountains and volcanoes that are sticking up from the ocean. Very simplified definition of what an island is. Since most people in Japan are not far from the sea, they turned to the sea for food. Early on in Japanese culture, they took to the sea. They had to. It's only they could connect with each other, only they can really get food. The isolation of the Japanese people allowed them to develop their own type of culture separate from the rest of Asia because they pretty much stuck to their islands or interacted with people from the same island chain of Japan. So you see here, this is Japan. It's off the coast of South Korea, and up here's Russia. So it kind of shows you a little bit about it. There's a lot more than just this. You have the northern part of Japan up here. Then you have the main body of Japan. You have some different islands on here, down to Okinawa. There's a bunch of island chains down in the southern part of Japan, but it's all joined together as Japan. The Ainu people were a culture that originally developed in Japan. The Ainu people spoke a language that was different from the other people in Asia and looked different than other people in Japan. Over time, the Ainu people began fighting each other for land, and this led to them mostly being driven to a singular island, Hokkaido, and being almost totally, completely lost. So, what happens is the Ainu people were different from other people in Asia. And they looked different to the people that was in Japan. And so over time, they began fighting. It pushed them into isolation, pushed them off to this singular island, and ultimately led to them being completely gone. The people that lived south of the Ainu in small fishing villages became the first Japanese people. These villages were ruled by powerful clans or extended families, and the head of each clan was the chief, and it was believed the chiefs were descended from natural spirits called kami. Now, we talked about other ancient civilizations throughout the course of this year. Ancient civilizations start off usually the same way. Usually they are nomads that turn into farmers, that turn into city builders, that turn into community and government builders. In Japan, it's a little bit different. You don't have as much farming. You still have farming, but you don't have as much. You don't really have as much nomadic people because they're on this island. It's mostly going to be fishing villages that were ruled by powerful clans or extended families, large group of people that would kind of have control of this region. The head of each clan was the chief, and they believed they were descended from the spirits called the kami. And it's not uncommon. There's a number of other cultures that also believe that their rulers descended from spiritual beings. The Japanese would engage in rituals to honor the kami. These rituals became a part of Shinto, which is the traditional religion of Japan. I got a video on Shinto on Google Classroom for you to go watch. According to the Shinto teaching, everything in nature has kami, or these spirits. Even the moon, sun, trees, waterfalls, and animals. And this is, if you remember from the African chapter, we talked about animism. This is similar to animism, the idea that everything has a spirit. Some clans are more powerful than others, and the Yamato rulers claim to be descended from the most powerful of all kami, the goddess of the sun. Even though they didn't control all of Japan, they claimed the title as emperors of all Japan. So they didn't actually have possession of all Japan, but they claimed to be over it anyway. And so the Yamato were some of the most powerful rulers in early Japanese history. Early on, the Japanese learned little from other cultures, but by the mid-500s, the Japanese leaders wanted to expand their horizons. They were isolated. They didn't really talk or look like some of the other people in Asia. And so because of this, until the mid-500s, they really kind of focused on their own things. They sent representatives to live in China and Korea with the intention of learning how the Chinese and Koreans lived. In addition, they invited people from China and Korea to come live in Japan too. Basically, it's the same thing with like foreign exchange students. The purpose of a foreign exchange program is to allow someone to come to the country for a period of time, live with the family, immerse yourself in the culture so they can learn from it, but also so the people and the ones around them can learn from them. And ironically, when I was in high school, my math and science teacher, they were married, they had a foreign exchange student come from Japan. I will never forget, his name was Naoki Yasuda. And at the time, my class was obsessed with the video game. It was one of the Legend of Zelda games, Ocarina of Time. And there's a village on there called Kakariko Village, which there's a lot of chickens running around in the village. Now, he told us that the word Kakariko, and I've never looked it up, so I might be misleading you at this point, but he told us that the word Kakariko means chicken, and that the village was like the village of chickens. So, and once again, if that's true or not, it made an interesting story if it wasn't true. But the idea behind it is that people that spread themselves out and come to other places, people are influenced by them and they influence the people as well. And so this is what happened here. The Japanese sent people to China and Korea to live amongst them and to immerse themselves in the culture and to learn from them. And people from China and Korea came to Japan too for the same reason. The emperors hoped this would help the Japanese learn new ways to work and think. One of the first things they learned from China was a written language, because the Japanese didn't have a written language. So many learned to write Chinese, but it was very different from the Japanese language. It was about 200 years later before they developed a writing system for Japan. And this kind of shows you the writing system for Japan in comparison to the writing system for China. So let's get into Prince Shotoku, which is a regent for his aunt, the empress, that was influential in bringing Chinese ideas to Japan. A regent is a person who rules a country for someone who is unable to rule alone. And all of his life, Prince Shotoku admired Chinese culture and saw his regency as a chance to adopt some Chinese ideas. So Prince Shotoku was one that was really big on wanting to expand their horizons and learn things from the Chinese. And so he really kind of pushed this. And when it comes down to it, you're going to have different types of leaders. Some leaders are going to want isolationism. They're going to want you to do it the way that you do it. Some want to learn and expand and grow. And usually those civilizations are the ones that make more strides in science and things like that. One of the changes was the adoption of Confucianism in the Japanese society. Prince Shotoku was a Buddhist, though, and although the Koreans brought it in to Japan 50 years earlier, it wasn't as popular. Prince Shotoku built a grand Buddhist temple and wrote commentaries on Buddhism to try and make it more popular. So basically, one of the things that happened, which really kind of worked to Prince Shotoku's disadvantage, is Confucianism coming into Japan. Prince Shotoku was a Buddhist. It wasn't really the most popular belief system in Japan, and so he really tries to promote it by building temples and writing commentaries and doing things like that to try to promote Buddhism because Confucianism was such a big deal. And here is a Buddhist temple that was built by Prince Shotoku. He also wanted to change the government to be more like China. This involved the emperors gaining more power like they had in China. The clan leaders were afraid that the emperor would get too powerful and opposed this, leading to little power added to the emperor. So again, we see the clan leaders, just like early on in Chinese history, were the ones that are the nobles and that owns the land having control. That's the way it is here also. And so that brings us to the end of section 1. We will continue with section 2.